I was asked to make, so this is a panel on the local context, and I'm the first speaker because I'm the non-local person here. So I was asked to make some comments from a New York City perspective, where we think we're the center of the world, basically, about what we're seeing, and to ask some questions about what the local context is. Oh, is that better? OMG, okay. It's kind of crazy because Michael just did a rundown of the state of the world, and it's pretty sombering, right? And it's also pretty exciting because of the role that we can play in a movement for social justice. But this is what I've noticed about the local context. I landed yesterday and had to get some food, and the first thing that struck me as I was walking down the street were on the store windows all of the September 11 references. So the messages were like, never forget, we will remember 9/11. And from what I heard, only one store had anything around peace. Those of us from New York were kind of struck because, you know, not even in the storefronts in New York City, a week later are there references to September 11th, actually. And then the other thing I noticed was that according to the hotel, we're the GGJ study group, but as soon as we walked in yesterday, the National Guard has been like all over this hotel for the past week. In general, I step off the plane and I see as we're leaving the airport, Raleigh, Durham is known as the Research Triangle. And so I didn't really know what that meant, so I just looked it up, and it turns out it's research for biotech stuff, right? And then this morning I opened up the paper here and I read that this is the 26th consecutive summer of consecutively hot summer. That's above average. So in my mind, I'm like, wow, there's a whole lot of stuff that's happening in North Carolina that actually, me coming from New York, I really do need to think about myself not as the center of the world, but I still do. But there's actually a whole lot of lessons. I have a lot of questions, and I think there's a whole lot of lessons to learn from what's going on here. So we have a great bunch of panelists here today. I think we're still waiting on a couple of people, so there's a couple of empty seats, and people are just going to kind of trickle in. But we have a great panel. I'm really excited to hear from them. And what we're asking each of the panelists to kind of talk about are, the first thing is to share what is the Southern context for the issue that you're working on. And and since we're all fighting in a local struggle that is clearly part of a global phenomenon, what ideas do you have that we can address these issues as a movement? And then for each of the panelists, what lessons can you share and to help people that may have the same issues in our own communities? So each panelist is going to speak for about 5 minutes, and then we'll do a Q&A, and then at the end we'll have a performance. And I think we have a couple of panelists that just rolled up, so I'm going to hand it over to my co-moderator, Ajamu, and he's going to lay the context for what we're going to hear.
Good morning, everybody.
Good morning.
So for this panel, we want to look at the local context, and I think it's important. You're here in North Carolina, you want to know the kind of work that we do. We want to share stories. There are places where we can interact with each other, where we can support the work, and that's important for a coalition like this to be engaged in that. But we believe that there's another reason to hear about what's going on here. And if you had a chance to look at your packet and the welcoming letter, we believe very strongly that as goes the South, so goes the nation. That's been the kind of framework for our work here. And yeah, that's, let's say the jazz applause for that. A lot of people in here have been working in that context. And there are just a number of reasons why a lot of people think that industry has gone away from North Carolina, but in fact manufacturing here has stepped up. Wherein the auto industry was centered in the Midwest, in Detroit and Ohio. Now this is a center for auto production in South Carolina, Alabama, other states. Foreign investment here. We just read that South Carolina, has the greatest number the highest per capita foreign investment in the country. That's South Carolina. Okay, so be looking out for Chinese investment, for Indian investment, for all of these other countries that are investing here. The other thing, political empowerment, I mean, it's been a long history of political empowerment. The role of the South in the history or in the politics of this country is pretty clear. We went through a period where the right-wing Democrats controlled Congress, and we know all about that. But even in recent times, the election of Obama, what's his name? I'm sorry, Barack Obama. Yeah, that wasn't a joke. That wasn't a joke. Yeah, that centered around the South, and in fact, we're going to be a battleground in the coming period. Also, we talk about demographic changes in our nation, that the largest number of Latino immigrants are coming to the South in Georgia, in Alabama, in North Carolina, más despacio, más despacio. That the demographic shifts and the relationship building that is necessary for building power is located here in the South as well. And then we all know that the majority of the African American people reside in the South now, that migration of the 20s, 30s, 40s, and 50s has been reversed, and that we are an absolute majority in the South. So we've got those reasons to look at this area as well. So with that, we want to look at some specific areas in the South. We understand that there are problems that face people across the country, but they have a particular expression here in the South, and you'll learn about what those things are. You'll find the common threads for these issues. And so I'll introduce the panel, and then they'll proceed. First, we'll have the attacks on the public sector, and we'll hear from Angaza Laughinghouse from UE 150, the North Carolina Public Service Workers Union. And then we'll hear from Nathanette Mayo, representing Black Workers for Justice, and she'll speak on environmental racism. And then we'll hear from Justin Flores from FLOC, who will be speaking on immigration and workers' rights. And then we'll hear from Michelle Laws, representing the North Carolina NAACP, and she'll be speaking on empowerment struggles in North Carolina. And then finally, Caitlin Breedlove from Southerners on New Ground will be speaking of homophobia in North Carolina and the struggle against the constitutional amendment. Each person will take about 5 to 7 minutes. We'll have a period of questions and answers, and then we'll give them an opportunity to sum up finally, and then we'll end this segment with a cultural presentation. So let's welcome, first of all, Angaza Laughinghouse.
All right. Good morning. As y'all know, Madison, Wisconsin, the fight back there by labor, unions, community groups, our youth, has brought this question of attacks on the public sector, service jobs, and workers' rights front and center. But North Carolina and the South has always had a long history of super exploitation and oppression of not only the indigenous people, of blacks, of working people, but it's been centered around the whole theft of lands, and genocide of the indigenous nations, the indigenous people, and slavery of Africans on the plantations here in the South. This tragic history of exploitation and oppression has influenced the lack of human rights and democratic rights right here in North Carolina and Southern communities and workplaces as well. Environmental racism, toxic dumping, contamination of well water in communities such as Shiloh in North Carolina, hog farms, toxic garbage dumps placed in the middle of communities like in Greensboro, gerrymandering of voting districts, the political policies that also diminish the quality of education that distort oppressed people's true history. And most importantly, the denial of basic internationally recognized human rights, workers' rights in the workplace have all been key features of the history of the South. But I want to speak more about the Taft-Hartley laws and the state of North Carolina laws that deny public service workers the basic fundamental human right to collectively bargain. I want to talk some more about that and how that impacts our fight for public services, our fight for workers' rights, and human rights. So it's important, I think, also to note that, the whole question of national oppression, racism, sexism, these are the core pillars of exploitation and oppression of Southern workers. And there's no way to talk about that in the context of these attacks on the public services and jobs and workers' rights. As a consequence, because North Carolina has the fewest number of unions, worker organizations, working class-based organizations, our movement's relatively weak. As we can see from Madison, Wisconsin, where the concentration of unions and worker organizations and conscience is a lot higher, was able to put up a big fight. But as y'all all know, that is sort of tailed out. The U.S. trade union movement in the North Carolina and the South is weak, not only in terms of the trade union density, the numbers of members in trade unions, but because of the lack of coordination, the lack of engagement of rank and file members in these organizations, but also because of the fact that many of these unions are not really reaching out to the African American, the Latino, and immigrant communities and other social movements. And most important, this trade union and other social movements, many of them lack a strategy for organizing in the South. They lack an analysis of these conditions and why we need a special program to address some of these questions, which will certainly challenge the power of U.S. capital here and globally. As we all know, what's happening here in terms of these attacks on the public sector and jobs is not only happening here in the United States, not only happening in an intense way here in the South where we have few worker organizations, few unions, but it's happening all over the world. Months ago, we were looking at the public sector fighting in Puerto Rico, fighting in Spain, fighting in Greece. But over the past 30 years, thanks for that. Over the past 30 years, the Black Workers for Justice has focused its organizing work basically in building and empowering working class folks, not only in our communities, but in our workplaces. Building unions, promoting and developing social economic justice by building grassroots working class organizations in our communities, building broad movements that unites all these sectors of black, brown, immigrant community we've been building. But primarily we've been building unions. They're a key factor and a key strategic point here in the South where we have very few unions. In 1983, Black Workers for Justice began organizing in the public sector. Durham, Rocky Mount, Raleigh, and later state government service workers. And we've had some success. By 1990, we had developed a base of public workers in the public sector and also in the private sector at Rocky Mount Engine Plant down in Rocky Mount. This main work has been building and sustaining minority union, not in terms of minority people, but in terms of not having a majority of the workers. We call these minority unions, since it doesn't have a majority of workers. Don't forget, no collective bargaining rights. And no contract. So building the North Carolina Public Service Workers Union, UE50, has been really a great boom to the work that we've been doing. We've been building a social justice kind of union, not just a straight business union. We've been able to also expand into Virginia, building the Virginia Public Service Workers Union, Local 160, and also encouraging our national union to push the bill, Local 170 in West Virginia. This has been very important in terms of building a strategic concentration of workers right here in the southern region. I'll be going to that national convention with my local, and we'll be uniting and pushing for even more organizing here in the South. We've been able to build broad coalitions with Here Our Public Employees, a coalition of public service workers that consist of firefighters, teachers, other employees. We've been able to work along with the NAACP in building the historic Thousands on Jones Street, which is a coalition of over hundreds of organizations that mobilizes thousands of people right here to our state capitol to fight on a 14-point agenda, which includes workers' rights and include the repeal of the collective bargaining ban for public service workers. In leading this fight, we also understand that there will be transitional struggles. You may not be able to win collective bargaining. It's a protracted struggle. So we know that we have to come up with a transitional plan, and we've been building a mental health workers' bill of rights, which you'll learn more about, and a workers' bill of rights. Thanks again. Also, we've been able to win some things. Been able to win a governor executive order to give public service workers and union organizers access, payroll deduction, posting, being able to hand out union literature, being able to meet and confer. with government officials. We're presently, like many other allies, we're still fighting for life on this whole question of the attacks on the public sector. I think that globally, we have to see the context of our struggle here in the South. Other nations, other countries are also their workers are fighting these same attacks, taking away workers' rights, taking away these human rights in these public service programs. Hopefully you'll get a chance to ask me some questions, and hopefully some of the folks in the audience can help me address them as well. I want to just thank you for the opportunity to just share that briefly. Thanks for the time.